Hey guys, hope you're all well. On this video I will be reviewing the second episode of the new Amazon Prime miniseries. It is Little Fires Everywhere, and episode 2 is called Seeds and All. So full spoilers from the start of this video, and I think I like this episode even more than the first one, potentially. And one of the things I like about this series so far is that when you look at kind of the way things developed and some of the plot happenings in this episode, for example, then I think potentially it could just play as this kind of like over the top soapy melodrama. And certainly from the first episode, I think there are elements of that, and that's fine. I mean that can work perfectly and be a functional and enjoyable thing. But obviously, there's always a balance and there's always a risk. Then it's just going to descend into that rather than having really good, in-depth sort of characters and a strong sort of like mystery behind it. And I think the reason it doesn't do that, or it hasn't so far, is because they do handle it with quite a subtle little touch. Obviously, the casting's very good, so the quality of the performances helps. But I think also everything just plays out very naturally, the pacing and stuff. So. And I think an improvement in this episode is that they do cut down more on those kind of signposty, musical like montage type moments. One or two's fine maybe, and it wasn't too bad in the first episode, but I think there were a couple that felt a little bit jarring. So they pretty much cut them out in this episode, which I like. There is a subtle use of like a Velvet Underground track quite near the end with a scene with Moody and Powell. So that was a good use of music. So yeah, I think this episode does feel a bit less of like that soapy type melodrama. Not that the first one did too much. It still got a good balance, but I think this one did feel like it moved even away from that. And I guess in some ways the drama of what's going on in this show maybe does feel like a straight up drama more than this kind of mystery where there's darker stuff going on. But that's obviously part of it too. Now, at the very end of the episode, there is something hinted at which could sort of turn into what feels like a soap opera type plot, and that is Pearl, who also works this job as a waitress, and you see a fair bit of her at the restaurant she works at here in this episode, partly because she actually uses the guy who works there. I think the manager or maybe just one of the other workers. She gets him to phone up Elena at one point to pretend to be like her reference for the house. Basically, pretends that he's like the previous landlord and sort of verifies. Oh, she's great. She was a perfect tenant, that sort of thing. But yeah, there's this relationship Mia has with one of the girls who works there, and she kind of one night when Mia's in there with Pal, and this girl kind of goes to the bathroom and isn't feeling too good, and not really because it's during her shift, so Mia actually like covers for her, takes the shifts. And we find out later then this character, I think her name's Babe or Beb, she comes to Mia and she mentions, oh, I'm sorry you had to do that, but she says she's got a daughter, but her daughter's missing. And it's the very last scene of the episode, actually, Mia goes to her and says, well, let's see about finding your daughter. And obviously, depending on how they handle that plot, it could be quite engrossing and interesting. But I think that's an example of a plot where it could just descend into kind of a soap opera type thing. But we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, really strong episode. I think the bulk of it jumps about quite a lot because obviously there's quite a few characters in this thing, but you get little bits here and there with the kids. But the bulk of it is like Mia and Elena and their ongoing relationship and kind of almost like a power dynamic happening between them, which is part of the intrigue. And the writing continues to sort of subvert your expectation of who these people are. And it does actually give you a date at the start of the episode. It says September 1997, which I think maybe just to make it clear that you're in the sort of, you're still in, well, what's the past essentially, because the first scene was, of course, the scene of the fire, and then we've gone back like 3 months before. But I did work out in the first review then we were probably somewhere in like the late 90s or something because of the references. And speaking of late 90s references, which had me marking out, there was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer reference in this episode, which obviously I love, which is Lexi, one of the Richardson daughters, is talking about it over the phone with one of her friends. So yeah, extra marks for the Buffy reference. And of course I'm reviewing Buffy on this channel. You can find the latest review up now. That's Lied to Me, so cheap plug there. So double the worth them referencing it in this episode. And a couple things, well, the Buffy reference is one, but just to add to Izzy's like weird breakfast routines from last week or the first episode, I sort of gave her props really for having Pop-Tarts for breakfast. For me, that's totally normal. Once in a while is fine. You shouldn't get shit for having Pop-Tarts. But she goes a little more to the obscure this week because she's having popsicles for breakfast, which again puts Elena's back out. So it's great, but I'm impressed and they've come up with a second like sort of unusual breakfast food, or something that could be seen as unusual. But popsicles. And I'm sort of praying now then each episode has a different breakfast food for Izzy and something equally sort of weird. So the Buffy reference and the popsicle had to be brought up. And again, there's a nice continuity because this episode also opens with them getting ready and kind of the two households getting ready. So there's a nice little visual touch where Elena is like getting the packed lunches ready for the kids for school, and she lines them all up in these bags, and the bags sort of color coordinated. I mean, each bag has a different color, and that is so Elena. But getting a bit more into the episode, I think there's a couple of nice contrasts in this episode, like contrast scenes, that kind of link the characters. I think the first one is then this is Pearl's first day at school, and we kind of get her walking in, and she goes with Moody. She obviously finds out her mother is now working for Elena, which I think she's a bit weirded out at first for whatever reason. I guess it's just normal. She started to hang out with this family a lot, and it's just that normal kind of thing if you find out, oh, your mother's going to be working for people who you're socializing with. But I think after a while she's fine. It's not really a big deal. But it's her first day at school, and it's a nice little parallel, her and her mother, because her mother's obviously having anxiety and kind of concerned about this new lifestyle and living in like this rich kind of suburban white neighborhood. So Pearl walks in the school with Moody, and she looks around, and I think she's just taking in the fact that then this school is really kind of very, very white, very kind of middle class and rich, and that immediately she feels kind of like an outcast. And I think later on it's sort of intentional, because we also get a scene with Pal, not Pal. I'm going to do this a lot. Sorry, with Mira, the Kerry Washington character, with her wandering around the house, because she gets this job obviously at the Richardsons, and she's like, the official title Elena gives her is something like house manager or something, which is a really odd way to sort of phrase it, because in a way she is just a maid, but she's responsible with kind of cleaning, with preparing meals, and that includes for any sort of events or functions. And that includes the book club, like this upcoming book club, which we saw kind of mentioned in last episode, and Rosemarie DeWitt, I should have said, is she was in briefly in the last episode, and is back in this. Really good actress, actually, underrated actress, sort of character actress. I think she was in Rachel Getting Married, and also Your Sister's Sister, also Mad Men. So yeah, pops up in a fair bit, but good character actress. She plays one of Elena's close friends, who's also at the book club. But Elena does make a joke about, yeah, she says to me, you can read the book for me if you want. And there's some good stuff at the book club, which I'll talk about in a minute, but there's a lot of fun because they're reading like the vagina monologues, and Elena keeps like trying to point out, well, it's a play actually. You keep referring to it as a book, but it's actually a play. So I enjoy that stuff as well. But yeah, there's sort of important like contrast shots. I think, as I said, Mia wandering around the house kind of mirrors her daughter wandering around the school. And one little thing we find out in the school is that naturally Lexi's boyfriend, who she has mentioned in the previous episode, he's coloured, he's African American. So that could be an interesting sort of thing, bearing in mind that the sort of themes this show is playing with, and the sort of family she comes from. But as Mia's wandering around the Richardsons' house, she's looking in like through their private stuff, really, through the drawers. So she sees like a Playboy or the equivalent of that magazine, which obviously belongs to one of the sons, probably the Jock, if I had to guess. But she also sees, she just looks through like the medicine cabinet looking to, and it's this interesting scene because you can see her almost like passing judgment on them as she looks through their sort of property and their personal belongings. So it's this interesting like character sort of twist where Mia is a lot more judgmental than you might expect this character to be, but she's still very grounded. You can sort of understand this. And the other kind of like contrast scenes, which are more like parallel, is towards the end of the episode where it's like the night of the book club. And after the book club, Mia and Elena actually bond a fair bit because Mia comes clean to her about the references and why she kind of lied about it. Just saying that then it's because she was really struggling to pay the rent on time monthly at the time, and that she was worried about the stereotypes. Then obviously sometimes an African American single parent is kind of seen as like unreliable, and obviously this appeals to Elena, and she feels sorry for her, so clearly she's going to continue to employ her and not toss her out of the house. But yeah, there's these two parallel scenes where Mia and Elena are like having wine and biscuits and like opening up with each other, and at the same time, Pell goes, invites Moody back to the house, and they're obviously getting closer, their relationship. We see a bit more of that in this, and they actually get high together, which is seen as this sort of kind of private type thing, because even now Mia is very sort of arty and meant to be quite liberal. I think Pell says to Moody, no, she might be cool, but she's not that cool. So, but they get high together. So again, it's like these contrast scenes, and I think that's another way that they're kind of playing around with the characters is then. As things go along, I think in some ways Elena is in some ways the more liberal one potentially. So I think they are definitely subverting the characters. But yeah, the main stuff with like the tenant and the references, because the husband, I think his name's Bill, the Joshua Jackson character, he's concerned about, you're inviting this woman without really knowing her references. And Elena challenges Mia about the reference and the fact that the ex-landlord, or supposed ex-landlord, said he'd never heard of her. And at the time, obviously she comes clean later, but at the time Mia just says, okay, I must have got the numbers mixed. And that's when obviously she pulls the thing when she gets the guy at the restaurant to cover for her. So that kind of plays out, but Elena's looking more into her background, and she even gets like her local police friend to do like a full background search. So clearly she's very concerned. But what I really enjoy in this episode with Mia and Elena is just the power dynamics. I think there's almost like a power game, and I think at times Mia is actually playing it more than Elena is. But so there's two good examples actually. One is then Mia, when she first shows up and Elena explains what the job is, Mia actually kind of says that then she can't work that day, or she can't work that morning. And Elena's taken aback because she kind of expects her to start there and then. And the reason Mia gives for this is because she says, well, I'm at my best creatively in the mornings. And yeah, that actually pays the bulk of the bills. Which is interesting because a lot of times with artists and stuff, you get this picture of them actually like struggling and maybe just muddling by. So you would have thought then what Elena was paying her would actually be more, and she obviously Mia obviously has this other job at the restaurant, but I guess maybe at this point Mia's quite established as an artist, so she might have quite regular, well-paid work, I suppose. But it's sort of interesting. But I do love that scene because I think again it is I think Mia's way of like asserting sort of authority and keeping that. I think she's a very proud woman, and she doesn't like to feel she's being like played and manipulated by this kind of white middle class woman. So that's a very interesting scene. And then another good example of that is at the book club, where she can hear them debating the vagina monologues, and there's this argument with Elena and with like the other members, or one of them at least, and they're sort of talking of the other woman is kind of saying, well, this there's more to the female vagina than to produce children. And Elena's kind of defending the other point of view. Then yeah, but that is a part of femininity, and that is something at least some women want and stuff. And as it goes along, Mia like just steps in and appears to defend Elena's point of view, or at least kind of says what makes a point about then. I think what she's actually saying is then the vagina is kind of like a metaphor a lot of times, but and sort of a way to read that scene again is then I think she's stepping in and she's kind of asserting her power, and she's speaking up for Elena, but she's kind of doing it in a way where she's taking back power, sort of thing. So it's very interesting, and as I said, that book club scene is very very entertaining, where they're just going off talking about vaginas all the time. It's really funny, and again, I did enjoy Elena. Keep reminding them it's a play actually, it's not a book. But this leads to Mia and Elena like opening up and getting drunk, and talking more about their art really, or about Mia's art, because she mentions, hey, I did a whole series on vaginas before, and Elena's sort of like, oh, I've never actually seen mine, which is kind of weird. I don't really get that, how you never would have seen your own vagina, but hey, whatever. Um, but it's another interesting scene because they are like relaxing around each other and enjoying each other's company. But it kind of gets a bit awkward where I think Mia feels at one point Elena's crossed the line or something, and just getting a bit too close, so she kind of pulls back and like, oh hey, it's getting late, and kind of goes home. The other big thing in the episode, I think, when it comes to Pell, is speaking of her kind of feeling, yeah, like an outcast in the school. Well, she's denied being accepted into like the proper sort of maths class, if you think, or her sort of level, because she makes a point saying, well, I am at this level from my last school, and the headmaster, or principal as they're called in America, makes this point about, yeah, but that's your previous school, you're not quite ready for this level, or he makes up some excuse why she can't be accepted into like this higher sort of class, and that she has to go back and do the level which she's already done in her school. But the whole impression is that he's being a bit like kind of racist or just discriminating against her. So Mia, or Pell, sorry, brings it up with her mother at first, And another thing which is quite interesting is, I think, how in this episode Mia seems like she's distracted and not really paying attention to Pal, because the scene in the restaurant where she actually goes to help the woman, the single mother, or the woman who's the girl who's lost her daughter, she seems quite distant in that scene. And Pell brings up this whole issue with the principal, and Mia just tells her, well, just go and talk to them and kind of be honest and head on and kind of deal with it yourself. Which I guess isn't bad advice, but obviously there's clearly a problem. But what Pell actually does is she goes to Elena, and she says, tells her the problem, and that's basically the problem fixed, because of course Elena she knows the school principal, she has influence, and she actually uses that influence to get Pal into the class. And there's a nice scene with Pal walking in and she feels at home, and there you have it. That kind of fixes it. So that's definitely gonna be something which causes like tension, because you gotta think at some point Mia's gonna find out about that, because when she asks about it later, Pal doesn't tell the truth. She's like, no, I just did what you said and just sorted it out myself. So she's not honest about that. So you've got to believe that's going to come up. And there's a couple of little things with Izzy and the fallout from what happened at the Constant, sorry, she's just getting abused at school, and she acts out at one point. But probably the best scene with Izzy is a scene actually with Mia, where Mia's like sort of cleaning the house, and it's when she's snooping about and she actually finds one of Izzy's drawings, and it's just like a little doodle, but she actually encourages Izzy and they bond a little bit. Izzy helps her making the dinner, so there's a potential, kind of relationship there, where I guess they both, neither one of them, I think, are that kind of in love with the Richardsons, if you like. Obviously, Izzy has her issues with her family, so there's room for sort of a bond there. So there you have it. That's pretty much the episode. Good episode again. As I said, in some ways, even better than the first one. So this is really good stuff. Really good drama, I think, at the moment, and a witty script as well, some good performances, and room for growth with the characters. It'll be interesting to see how they developed. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the second episode of Little Fires Everywhere, if I can remember the title. Yeah, Little Fires Everywhere. I attempted had a lapse of insanity, but yeah, let me know your thoughts on the show if you've been watching along, and I'll try and get the third episode watched and reviewed this week to keep it going. But thanks for watching or listening, and stay tuned for more new television reviews coming soon on the channel. Thanks for listening.